Over the last 5 months, I've been getting punched in the face, kicked in the face, and submitted almost daily in the pursuit of learning how to fight. And in those 5 months, I've learned a lot about fighting, I've learned a lot about myself, and today I wanted to share with you guys the reason I got into fighting in the first place, because I think it's a reason that will resonate with a lot of people, especially those of you who are young adults and Gen Z like myself. So if you're new to the channel, welcome back. My name is Connor, and I recently got into fighting this summer because honestly, it was something that I was always pretty much afraid of. Now, when I say I was afraid of it, I didn't mean like I was just afraid of like getting into a fight. I didn't really have that fear, but I had this aversion to physical confrontation that I think was very subconsciously rooted in me my entire life. Now, the best example I give to people when I kind of talk to them about why I got into fighting is, you know that dream you have when you're trying to run away from someone and you can't run, it feels like you're running underwater? Well, I've always had that dream, but for me, it's always been trying to punch somebody and I just cannot generate any force. And I've always had that dream my entire life. It's been a recurring dream since I was like 10 years old. And I think that that was always something that was really ingrained in me, that like physical confrontation just wasn't meant for me. Nowadays, a lot of contact sports like football are kind of being vilified, even though they are pretty dangerous and concussions are a really common thing. It feels like men in general are being encouraged to sort of take the easier way out and not really face head on this physical confrontation aspect that's been so common among men for pretty much forever. And I think because of that, being a man, quote unquote, has held less weight than it's really ever held before. And in a way that's a bit sad. I think a lot of what we see in society with the corruption of things like morality and stuff all stem from men in general being weak. And I really do not want to be contributing to that problem, as fighting isn't necessarily the end-all be-all to men being strong. It's just one aspect of being a man that I think a lot of people kind of miss out on nowadays, and I thought that that was a really big thing I needed to get into. And there was a key speech I heard by Jordan Peterson that really pushed me to do it more than anything else. Jordan Peterson was talking about what the definition of a good man is, and he wanted to make a very clear distinction between someone incapable of bad and someone who is actually truly good. Jordan Peterson basically said a good man is not somebody who is incapable of harm or detriment, but someone who has the capability to create good harm or destruction, but chooses to the alternative, who chooses to do good. And I'll be honest, that message was so different than everything I'd heard about morality before. I always thought that if you just sort of did what's considered good by everybody else, then you're a good person. But I felt very incapable of being physically capable in a confrontation type setting, and because of that, I felt like it was something that I just needed to work on. And after reflecting on my own thoughts in that speech by Jordan Peterson, I did start going to boxing lessons and jiu-jitsu practice. And after 5 months of pretty consistent training, I wanted to share with you 3 big lessons that also reinforced the reason I got into fighting in the first place. The first is that fighting is very humbling and very ego-killing. Now, what I mean by this is the world we live in nowadays seems to promote facades very commonly. There's things like social media, for example. Everyone can claim to be a millionaire. Everybody has the Photoshop six-pack or is on steroids and claims to, be jacked naturally and study their program. And it feels like it goes pretty much unchecked normally. But what fighting does is it directly tests who you say you are and who you actually are. Now, you can go into the training room and say, I'm going to submit everybody in jiu-jitsu today. And then when you go to jiu-jitsu, you have to do that. It's not something that you can claim without being checked, because you can't really pretend that you didn't get submitted when everybody sees it. And even if no one sees it, there is a very internal thing of your ego is being killed. In my recent jiu-jitsu video, I talked about how when you start training jiu-jitsu, it feels like you're drowning. And that is the same for kickboxing. The first time I ever sparred kickboxing was in a Muay Thai class directly after my jiu-jitsu training. On Saturdays, you go to jiu-jitsu and you roll for about an hour, and it's pretty much just an open mat, so it's a lot of rounds, and you go straight into a Muay Thai class that the gym offers directly after. And I got a couple punches in from my boxing, but I remember at the very end, I think I'm in like the 6th round of sparring, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna try to like do some UFC stuff that I've seen. I switch my stance, go southpaw, get kicked straight across the chin. It was one of the most painful things ever. And I knew for a fact that if my coach had not pulled that kick, I would be completely unconscious. And that was one of the most humbling experiences I think I've ever been through, because I just knew that I thought that I was much better at this than I was. I thought that all the boxing training would prepare me much better than it did, and I was completely out of my element. But what's interesting about martial arts is there's this weird pride you start to get in kind of getting beat up, because even though you get beat up, those days are often the days you learn the most. And over enough time and enough times just getting beat up in jiu-jitsu or, light sparring sessions, you start to realize that you really are making more and more progress. And it feels like that progress just compounds, especially in the first 1 to 3 months. It feels like you're learning everything. It feels like you're really a sponge. And after a little bit of time, I just really felt like I was more and more capable. And it does start to build up this internal confidence, but also a humility along with it, which I don't think a lot of things can really do. I often talk about the gym and its transformative abilities, and the gym is absolutely great. But I think the gym doesn't necessarily test you in the same way. You can kind of think you're going really hard, and let's say you hit a set for 10 reps, and it's a really hard set. it might be really hard. You might be at like a rate of perceived exertion of like 9 out of 10, but you might have had 2 or 3 more reps left in the tank, and no one's ever going to call you on that or check you on it, because how are they going to know? But in martial arts, you can't pretend that you didn't get submitted or punched in the face or, you know, couldn't block a kick, because it happened. And I think building that humility along with the confidence that comes with training is one of the most intrinsically masculine things that you can do nowadays. Now, of course, women can train as well, and that's great. I do believe that as a man, it is so nice to have that capacity and that outlet to train and channel a lot of your emotions, which brings me into my next point. It's a great channel for your anger. I think there's this common notion that guys are just going to get angry or like see red and they're just going to become, you know, Conor McGregor and knock somebody out just because they're angry. But I don't think that could be any further from the truth. There's recently a stat that released that men overestimate their ability to fight by somewhere around 4,000%, which I have no idea how they measure that, but I think it's honestly probably not that inaccurate. But like I said, once you actually start to train, you realize how wrong you were, but you also have this outlet to channel a lot of your emotion. And it's not exactly how you may think. It's not like you go in angry, you punch people, and then you leave and you're happy. But what it is it shows you how to really control your anger. If I go into a jiu-jitsu roll, for example, and I get tapped out and I'm all angry, there's nothing really productive that comes out of that other than I try to get angry, I try to be quicker and less technical, and then I get submitted again. I can't tell you how many times that happened in the first couple months where I'd be like, I hate getting submitted. I think I'm too good for this. And then I go into the roll and then I, you know, try to pull a move or something and I get arm dragged, my back taken, and I'm, you know, next thing I know, I'm being submitted. And I'm not saying anger is bad, but because you get this realization that your technique and being calm is so helpful, I definitely noticed that in other situations when I get angry, like I'm studying for a test and I start to get a little angry because I'm not getting something, you start to realize how unproductive that is. And I'm not saying I'm some monk now that I've done this, but it definitely does provide you with a concrete framework and an ability to see things more as logical and less emotional, because you have an outlet to, one, put a lot of your feelings into, because even though it's, you know, definitely better to be calm, you still get kind of amped up. There's definitely still some real emotion that goes into fighting, but learning to be calm and learning to control that feeling is also something that is super beneficial and that I think has benefited me beyond the mats and beyond the training room. And the third lesson of fighting is that fighting is really difficult. Now, I said this in my jiu-jitsu video and it applies to fighting as well. Fighting is both one of the most fun things I do every day and one of the hardest things I do every day. There are so many days when I go to jiu-jitsu, or I'm about to go to jiu-jitsu rather, I'm sitting in my dorm room right now and I'm like, bro, there is no way I want to train today. I'm so tired. Went to class, I already lifted, I don't want to go. And I have never once regretted going. After I step on the mat and get a couple drills in and rolls in, I never once regretted it. And typically I have this euphoric happiness feeling even if I got beat up by the brown belts and purple belts the entire time. So much of the difficulties I think we face in life nowadays are you going to choose the hard route that's going to be more beneficial, or are you going to choose the easy route and get less reward for it? Boxing and jiu-jitsu force you to delay gratification to pretty much the fullest extent, because it's going to take years of training to get the next belt. It's going to take years of training to submit the upper level belts. You have to accept that right when you start, because if you think that you're going to have to get good in a couple weeks, you're going to quit and you're not going to be having fun a couple days or weeks in, because you're going to be so frustrated by the lack of progress. And because it's so difficult and because you have to accept that it's such an uphill climb, it really does allow you to set that framework for everything else. And I talked to my friend David about my YouTube videos before, and I started to realize that I win at making YouTube videos by continuing to make YouTube videos over a long enough time period. And I think nothing has reinforced that more than going to the training sessions every day. Even if I'm not having the best training session, I just know that if I put in enough hours and if I'm consistent enough over a long enough time period, I really can't fail at getting better. And I do think that even though lots of things in life are super difficult, that framework has served me so well. Even in the short amount of time, just having that reinforced day in and day out really can be just transformative in and of itself. So those are my reasons for getting into fighting and training in general. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.